Palestinian authorities are proposing a Red Cross-supervised evacuation of Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, as health officials warn the only way to save 36 newborns trapped there would be to call a ceasefire and transport them out of the besieged territory. Israeli forces have encircled Al-Shifa Hospital. Hundreds of patients, medical staff, and displaced people are trapped there with dwindling supplies and without electricity to run incubators and other equipment. United Nations officials say they are witnessing violations of humanitarian law in Palestine. Izumi Nakamitsu is a high representative for disarmament affairs at the UN.
The relentless Israeli bombardment continues hitting civilians, hospitals, refugee camps, mosques, churches, and UN facilities, including shelters. The Secretary General is, and I am, deeply concerned about clear violation of international humanitarian law that we're witnessing in the ongoing conflict. Let me repeat the clear, unequivocal position of the United Nations that no party to an armed conflict is above international humanitarian law. Even wars have rules.
She spoke Monday at a hearing on a nuclear-free Middle East zone. This comes a week after a high-level Israeli cabinet member entertained the idea of nuclear bombing Gaza. Meanwhile, Hamas says it's ready to release 70 hostages held captive since its October 7th terrorist attack in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire. In Israel, more than 100 relatives of hostages held by Hamas kicked off a march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, demanding Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu do more to secure captives' release. Shelley Shem Tov is mother of Omer, is demanding answers from the Prime Minister and his cabinet and to bring back their children and families. Yuval Aran also has family held captive.
My niece is 3 years old, my nephew is 8 years old, and my cousin is 12-year-old. My mother was taken, my sister's husband, and my aunt. They were all taken 39 days ago, and I can't sit at home anymore. I have to do something.
Netanyahu faces growing scrutiny as tens of thousands have been protesting his government's response and demanding a ceasefire in Israel. Those protests continue. In the U.S., the only Palestinian American, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, spoke at an event last night reiterating her call for a ceasefire in Gaza. She was censured by House Republicans and a few other Democrats supporting the measure last week. Here in the Bay Area, upwards of 700 Jews and their supporters staged a sit-in at the Oakland Federal Building demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Center for Constitutional Rights has filed a lawsuit against President Joe Biden, arguing he's failed to prevent what it's calling a genocide in Gaza. President Joe Biden travels to San Francisco today, where he will host representatives from 21 nation members of APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. Topics include climate change, labor, and fentanyl trafficking. Biden is slated to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping tomorrow. Activists say they will rally to shut down APEC tomorrow, Wednesday, citing the 1,200 corporate leaders attending and the threats international trade frameworks and dictatorships in the Asia-Pacific pose to labor rights, human rights, and the environment. With just days left to continue government funding or face a shutdown by Friday, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen Monday, speaking from the APEC summit, urged Republicans in control of the House to find common ground and pass a funding bill. House Speaker Mike Johnson Friday released a 2-stage funding plan. He's yet to get full buy-in from the Democratic-controlled Senate or the White House. Edwin Vieira reports.
Right now, I oppose this measure. I think it's a mistake. I don't support the rule advancing it. And I think he should switch directions like he did last week with a very good move by putting Israel forward, paid for, out of the IRS expansion.
Congress has until Friday to avert a government shutdown. Johnson's CR has some support among Democrats, but others are calling it a gimmick, likely to lead to more problems later. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he's pleased the CR avoids the steep cuts demanded by the hard right, though it's still less than ideal. He says bipartisanship is the only way forward.
I've said on multiple occasions that if we're going to work together to keep the government open, Speaker Johnson will have to avoid pushing steep cuts or poison pills that Democrats can't support.
I'm Edwin J. Vieira for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
A massive new federal government report out today says climate change is impacting Americans' daily lives with harms that are already far-reaching and worsening across every region of the country. The National Climate Assessment is a 5-year localized update on what global warming is doing and will do to the U.S. It paints a picture of a nation that's warming about 60% faster than the world as a whole, regularly gets smacked with costly weather disasters, and is facing even bigger future problems, including worsening health and inequities that hurt poor and minority communities hardest. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for Pacifica Radio.